Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leaders Show. We're back, and we're live every first and third Wednesday of each month at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. And each week we discuss key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology with a special focus on automation, AI, and digital transformation in hopes of making you a better digital leader. This week we're discussing the evolution of conversational AI, plus other headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up the Institute for RPA and AI, as well as the Digital Enterprise Institute. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network, providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Check us out at irpaai.com. My new co-host is Chris Cerdak. He's a former White House Chief Transformation Officer, Automation and AI Practice Lead at EY, Executive Partner for Digital Transformation at Gartner. He's an engineer, a futurist, a transformation executive, and best-selling author. Chris, welcome back.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's good to see you again.
I didn't scare you away. You're here.
No, well, there's no lack of things to be afraid of. So you weren't too high on the list for my Halloween.
For now. But for those of you who've been watching the show for a while, Chris has been a frequent guest, but we started a few weeks ago as our new co-host. And in addition to that long list of experience you have, Chris is also a senior advisor to ERPA AI and helping us with a lot of the training programs that we're launching over the next few months. So glad to have you back.
My pleasure.
So couple headlines caught my eye. The big one is the White House unveiling this AI executive order, Biden's executive AI order. And it seems like people weren't really taking it seriously when it was first talked about, but I don't know. It seems like maybe it's better or more well received than originally thought. No?
Well, and I think there's a certain combination of yin and yang, far too late and just in time, or very futuristic, which shouldn't be too off-putting. I think it's a great acknowledgement of both the promise and peril that's out there, and that the government is starting to take it quite seriously. I think it provides an interesting framework where I think until we actually took the step with conversational or generative AI released at large to the public for generic consumption as opposed to very focused consumption, like picking best movie choices off of Netflix, very specific use case. But this releasing it to the wild and sort of letting it be feral for the last year, I think really clarified many of the points that require some degree of oversight or governance. And so from that perspective, I think it's actually quite timely, and a lot of what they're suggesting makes a lot of sense.
So the interesting thing that popped out to me too is, and at least from my understanding, this is not like the EU regulation where they're going to regulate private industries, but they are going to limit, what can be done, within government and with federal employees. And so that's one difference. The other thing that caught my eye though is that there seems to be a provision in there around immigration. And allowing for more highly skilled workers to come into the country, for the benefit of AI within the federal government, including defense and energy. That's a really interesting idea for I think a country that has, in some ways fallen behind on innovation and technology.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that it's happening at the same time that we're sort of economically and from a capital perspective deglobalizing. We're globalizing the labor market. So those are kind of opposite effects, which I think is pretty fascinating. And so we're entering an entirely new and accelerating age of labor arbitrage, because we're no longer stuck in one particular place. We really learned that over the last 5 years. And so global competition for labor, not just for individual companies, but individual countries, I think is going to be a growing concern for most people.
Well, that happening. And then, there's been a couple events again, the last couple of weeks where the, various, so-called godfathers of AI are putting, more policy proposals out there around safety frameworks and stuff. But I'll tell you, it doesn't seem like that's slowing the space down at all. I mean, Nvidia is still going gangbusters. Although there was some headlines around the U.S. maybe stopping some of that shipments to go to China from a security standpoint. But other than that, I mean, I've got a long list here of AI startups that are getting crazy valuations. One 500 million, another Norway-based robotics firm 375 million, and even OpenAI is looking at capital that would put their valuation at 86 billion with a B. I mean, I don't even know how many zeros that is, Chris.
There's a point at which imaginary numbers are just, I mean, it's throw on another zero, why not, to a certain extent. But let's not kid ourselves. This is the same as we saw in 2015 with RPA companies, what we saw in 2008 with social media, 1999 with web. I mean, the same cycles repeat. They're just happening a lot faster and greater amplitude, which I think causes some of the consternation for executives, because you used to have 2 years to think about it before you jumped in. Now you have to simultaneously jump into this new thing, otherwise you might be left behind, but you're not really sure what this thing is yet. And I think hence the shift in focus a little bit to some governance. It's sort of like we're flying across the Atlantic in a brand new airplane, and someone came up with the idea, maybe we need a compass. Maybe landing gear might be helpful. So, at least we're at that point. Someone's trying to design the landing gear while we're halfway across the Atlantic.
Yeah. I was telling somebody before, I may mention this to you at one point. I don't know if it was on the air beforehand, but I would say what's exciting about it for me, part of what we do here as an association is evangelize new technology and talk about, what's happening in the space. So we tend to be optimists, I think. But, for my entire career, I think we've been, almost defending technology, right? Executives within, enterprises usually are generally skeptical of the voodoo factor of new technologies being as transformative as industry watchers and certainly salespeople within companies claim them to be. But this is almost the opposite, to your point, right? We're getting so much of an influx of companies coming to us with potential use cases and ideas. We talked about the regulation and the kind of the guardrails and things like that, but it's almost like a paradigm has gone upside down.
It's funny that you say that, because I've been in technology my entire career, and I'm often pointing out the potential pitfalls, hey, there's only a 5% success rate, that sort of thing. And I know our mutual friend, Frank Casale, is kind of like, oh, you're such a pessimist. I'm like, well, one person's pessimist is another person's realist. And the example I often give, and I spoke of this recently at a couple of conferences on governing AI, is, why are there brakes on a race car? So you can go faster, right? I mean, if I can't brake, I don't want to go too fast because it's going to hurt. But, putting brakes on the race car is what allows me to go over 200 miles per hour. So having some of these controls in place so that you at least mitigate when something goes wrong, and hopefully do some prevention as well, I think is a key to successful technology adoption.
Well, speaking of, Tesla won a big lawsuit this week around the autopilot on their cars, and I don't know if it's just media speculation, but they're saying that this may open the door for a lot more of the advancement as far as self-driving cars.
And of my legal background and so forth, and I've worked in the regulatory and legal space for many, many years, and attorneys hate nothing more than uncertainty. It's both a chance for them to make their billings, but it's also the chance for them to lose something. So this sort of clarity will certainly unlock, I think, some of the innovation. The greater challenge is for existing companies have these huge departments that they call compliance, and they're really, really talented at saying no. Innovators and disruptors have a non-compliance department, and they default to yes and then figure out the legal implications after the fact. It's up to you to determine which one of those has a distinct advantage in an age of transformation. But generally speaking, as soon as you get some clarity out of the law and regulations, which by their nature are always kind of behind the technology curve, the easier it is for others to start jumping into the pool and swimming around.
So, Chris, the last topic before we invite our guest and get to our main topic around conversational AI, you sent me this I mean, it's kind of almost laughable. This Forbes article about board of directors within these companies thinking they're already experts at Gen AI.
So I would love to know the source data there, right? But 28% of board members of companies think they're experts. I've been doing this almost 30 years. I took my first classes on neural networks in 1996. And in certain silos, I might have expertise, but calling myself an expert, really? So, I mean, kudos to them if they're that if they're that on top of things and really understand the technology that well. But holy cow, I think it's endemic of the problem of this technology. It's moving so quickly, and many people, and I know you know this from the Urban Network, a lot of people, when they're in front of a microphone, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, I understand it. We're cool." When they're behind closed doors, the heart palpitations kind of kick in a little bit, and then we can have a little bit more blunt and honest discussion about it. So kudos for kind of putting it out there that you know this stuff, but I think it's a time for a lot of technology and business humility is appropriate right now.
You beat me to it. Humility is the word. I was actually at a conference week before last. It was a contact center expo, and the keynote speaker was a woman. Maybe I can see if I can get her on the show. Crystal Washington, really sharp futurist and kind of, I would say, kind of tech motivational speaker. But she said something really interesting to me, to the group, and said, and this was surprising to me coming from somebody who billed themselves as a futurist. She said, we're at a point where technology is accelerating so rapidly that it's impossible to be an expert at all of these technologies. And if you say you are, you're lying. But I think the main point she was trying to make is that, be humble and give yourself a break. Because if you try to think you know all things about all these, you just first of all, you can't do it. It's going to create stress and anxiety. But then, I think to your point, then we don't have the right conversations about what are the pros and cons and potential issues with some of these technologies.
I don't know how many centuries it goes back, but there's that old phrase, pride cometh before the fall. It's going to come hard and fast if you again don't have that degree of humility. Let go a little bit of the hubris and say, hey, I don't know enough about this and I need to know more, and then find those people, those niche people with the expertise necessary to start putting the puzzle together.
So speaking of niche people with expertise, that's a great segue, Chris. You're getting good at the show stuff. To introduce our guest today, Venky Krishnaswamy. He's a tech entrepreneur and leader. He's the former head of Avaya Labs and founder of Koopid, which is now part of Dialpad. He's authored 50 technical papers, I think 50 US patents, incubated new products, and is one of the real pioneers behind conversational AI. So Venky, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks. And Chris, great stories there. I have to lead off with a story, given this kind of the thing that you said about the yes and the no and the insane valuation. So there's a really nice little joke that I heard of a founder warning other founders, hey, founders, be careful out there. I accidentally left my laptop open in my car with my pitch deck, and somebody broke my window and dropped in a term sheet. So that's...
Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur, I love those yeses from VCs, but from my scientist side, I say, whoa, this can get pretty scary. I don't know who can make judgments like that so quickly. So with that, Dan, how would you like to get started with our little segment on conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all,
but if I can interrupt, Venky, the term sheet was probably generated on ChatGPT anyways.
Exactly. And it probably added a few zeros.
Yeah.
So Venky, I know you. I want to ask you about to do the level set on kind of what do we mean when we're talking about conversational AI. But before we do that, I mentioned some of the companies you've been with, but I'd love for you to just give a little background on your experience as it relates to conversational AI as well.
Yeah, so I'm kind of you might call a senior executive, but my career really has been in two parts. One, I spent about over 20 years in commercial research. I was at Bell Labs and then at Avaya after that. I headed the Avaya research organization. And you might say that it took me 25 years to realize that I really needed to do a startup. So I left and did a startup, and 5 years later, we were acquired by a fast-growing startup called Dialpad, which is emerging as one of the leaders in the space. And my motivation for doing that was this this sudden switch that I saw being turned on in this whole conversational AI space. And it was literally a technology switch. Some of these inflections happen because some technology shows up. Not that it's kind of it just shows up out of the blue. It's been kind of incubating and brewing and evolving, and suddenly it kind of crosses the chasm to being applicable at scale. That happened with AI around 2014, 2015, and I felt like I should catch the wave. That's my background.
Oh, great. Yeah. And like you say, this conversational AI thing, has definitely gotten a resurgence. I think all AI has gotten kind of a resurgence lately because of all this Gen AI stuff. But kind of give us give us a sense of kind of when you talk about conversational AI, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so I think for me, going back to basics is always useful. Otherwise, you can kind of float around, kind of in the realm of what everybody else is saying, and not really know a whole lot. So to me, just setting some basics, and these are things that I remind myself of all the time, right? So when you hear of a new development, new algorithm, somebody raised a lot of money, what are we talking about? So just my understanding of conversational AI, of course, there are lots of variations of this, but my understanding is really the ability of a machine to understand natural language and do something with it, right? And typically, that's easiest when the natural language comes in the form of text. But humans being who they are, they want to speak to computers, and so that's been of great interest over decades, really, of having computers respond to speech, understand what the speaker is saying, and do something with it. So that's kind of what that broad field is conversational AI. Specifically, my expertise has been applying that to communications applications. And when you think of that, then the kind of like the basic pipeline here is for the system to ingest text, small, large, in a stream, at one go, whatever, right? I mean, there are many ways of doing this. It ingests text and it parses it. And that parsing step is usually called NLP, or natural language processing, which is really kind of just dissect what's coming in and put it in the form of words and sentences and so on. And then the next step is to understand what that means. So that's called natural language understanding. So you've got the words, you've got the sentences. Now, what does this mean, right? And if you can accurately enough characterize what that means, then you can move on to the next step of, so here's what I can do with it, right? So that's kind of like the basic flow of all conversational AI, and it's been the flow for a long time. What changed, the step function that I talked about 2014, 2015, was that the emergence of machine learning essentially took this to an absolute next level, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that did was also it made human speech transcription accurate enough so that you could then feed human speech into this text-based pipeline, right? Previously to that, you had to try and understand speech in the speech domain, which is kind of more like the realm of something called digital signal processing. You have to kind of break the signal itself and try to model sound and things like that. But once transcription came about, you don't have to worry about sound, inflection, any of those things. You just take the words and feed it into this pipeline, right? So that's kind of some of the basics of this technology. Let me just go on to just one more, and you don't have to kind of understand all of the details here, but this is just to highlight what changed, right? So previously, the way to try and understand speech was to try and break apart a sentence, right? So the way you understand grammar, there's a noun, pronouns, subject, object, and so on. So computers would try and do the same. They would try to take a sentence and try to understand in the more grammatical sense and then try and extract meaning. Incredibly hard problem. And so you have to be very, very narrow in how you applied it. Then, some scientists said, hey, there's got to be an easier way. And so they kind of constrained the problem to saying, is this sentence like that sentence, right? So they just said, I heard something, is it anything like this other thing that I have? I have like 10 phrases. I heard something. Can I say which one of these 10 phrases matches that? And so there was an algorithm to kind of just try and match up the words and see which ones were close to each other and see if those were similar enough, right? Again, very laborious and manual, very restricted in its use, which kind of kept this whole technology in the realm of very small applications. Suddenly, in 2014, 2015, deep learning, neural network became popular or became practical because of all the computing and algorithm developments. And essentially, deep learning essentially said, you can process things in bulk, and you don't have to be very exact about things. You can just take lots of text and then put them into buckets. Right? And once they're in buckets, you can kind of broadly say, hey, this is my bucket for, if you're talking about food, this is my bucket for carbs, this is my bucket for proteins, this is my bucket for vegetables, and so on, right? And that gives you a little bit more, and basically you feed that engine by giving it a lot of training data, right? But the first level of neural networks were all like single layer. You got one pass at this, and often you got decent results, better than the old algorithms, but not necessarily accurate enough for all the applications that we can dream of. What's changed in the last 2 years are these large language models, and essentially that is about collecting billions and billions of sentences. So think about everything that's ever been said by anybody. Now, if you take something that somebody says, the chances of finding something similar to that are massively higher than before. Instead of comparing against 10, you compare that against 100 billion. And if you can do that fast enough, you can come up with really, really accurate results. So that is essentially what large language models do. And given that they're now practical, suddenly we can do all those things that we were dreaming about 50 years ago when we first started about with this technology.
So talk to me, Venky, about chatbots, right? Because every time you use that word, at least when I speak to a client or a consumer, they start cringing, right? My sense is that it's become this overused term to describe, dumb bots versus some of the stuff you're talking about. But you spent a lot of time in this space.
Yeah, no, and that skepticism is warranted. I did run a company that produced chatbots, and I have to say that I've yet to meet a chatbot that did what I thought it should do. Right, so it's literally that bad, and it's not particularly surprising. Right, so at the core, what is a chatbot? A chatbot is trying to mimic what a human might do if you asked it questions, right? And in particular, in a enterprise situation, somebody who's going to ask questions, they're going to ask hard questions. They're going to say, "Hey, you shipped this to me. The package was broken. The thing was torn. I want to return this, and when can I get my money back?" Right? I mean, that's kind of a lot of stuff to parse for a machine. And the state of the art for a long time and continues to be, chatbots do what you teach them to do, right? And what you teach them to do, the teaching of a chatbot is by no means an exact science. I mean, there's business of training a chatbot from a billion phrases and so on is really teaching it what to do. And the reality is for most applications for businesses, the what to do is often an inexact science. It's kind of requires a lot of judgment, right? I mean, if there's a guy who's complaining, often the person who's reacting to that, it depends on the personality of the person who's reacting. If they're a stickler for rules, they don't care how much you complain. They're going to say, sorry, that's 31 days, you're not eligible to a refund. Whereas somebody else who's kind of looks at a screen and says, this guy buys a lot, and I have the authority to give them a discount, may come back and say, hey, I'm really sorry about that. I know it's a day over, but we'll forgive this, we'll give you a discount, we'll make you happy, right? So that's kind of judgment that's going on. And chatbots don't know judgment. They're mimicking what they're being told, and no chatbot can mimic every situation everybody can encounter and every personality that's there in that situation. So
Venky, how long ago did Microsoft release Clippy in Microsoft Office? It was like in the early 2000s or something.
Exactly.
And everything you just described was the state of the art for a very long time until, as you pointed out, like 2014, 15, or maybe a little later than that, we came up with transformers. Exactly. And really what you were just speaking about is using transformers and matrix math to parameterize language in front of the neural networks was the real innovation that led to this. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And essentially, so to tie that back to the story, I believe chatbots will get dramatically better simply because of that reason, right? Because now you can teach chatbots, instead of teaching them from 100 situations, you can teach them from 100 billion situations. And if they can kind of, and chatbots, the good thing about chatbots is they run on machines that can absorb a lot, right? So they can process 100 billion situations, and they can find a situation that may be similar to the current situation and come up with a response that they learn from what the 1 in 100 billion, right? So I do believe they will get better, but it's going to be the state of human interaction always changes, right? The language changes, the way people communicate changes, business situations change. So chatbots are always going to be that one step behind. So there's always going to be the zero, the first incident of something that they've never seen where they'll screw up. Right.
All right. I can't leave that landmine alone. I'm going to have to step on it. Right. So that's sort of the challenge that we face. If I have 100 billion examples, then the chatbot's going to be right far more often. And when it's inevitably wrong at some point, it's going to be way worse. Would you agree? That's kind of the math that we're facing with this.
That's exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, for chatbots, to be useful, you have to think about the situations where they're not going to work and figure out how to back out gracefully and hope that it's not going to be catastrophic, right? So you don't want to be in the situation of the lawyer who went up against the judge, and the judge said, where did you get this argument from? And that came from ChatGPT. It was all garbage, right? So you don't want to be in that situation. So that's going to be the challenge, but they are going to get better. That's for sure.
So I envision this world, and this might be a little bit contrarian to some of my friends that are in the CX business, the contact center business. There's always been this kind of back and forth between folks saying, hey, you'll never replace people in the contact center business, and technology people saying we don't need any people in the customer experience business. And of course, like most things, the answer is probably somewhere in between. But my vision for this, Venky, is that customer experience becomes more, customer contact center becomes more contact concierge, if you will. And that you'll be able to use things like conversational AI, chatbots to do, to both of your points, 98% of the interactions as well or better than a human could do, faster, cheaper, right? But unlike ChatGPT, which apparently gives you a wrong answer if it doesn't know the answer, can escalate when it doesn't know the answer to a person, who might be able to do that extra level of reasoning, or just has an answer that it can answer. Do you agree with that vision?
Broadly, I think that's the right vision, and I think more and more businesses are going to adopt that strategy. But here's the challenge that I think a lot of people are going to run to, right? Which is the problem of trust. The more you, to the point Chris made, money is being poured into generative AI applications, right? It's also well known that generative AI hallucinates, right? So, will you be able to eliminate those hallucinations? And will the 1 in 100 hallucination destroy enough trust that nobody wants to interact with other 99%? We don't know the answer to that, right? So,
well, and who is interacting with enough expertise to recognize a hallucination when it happens? That's kind of the challenge of releasing ChatGPT to the wild. Would you agree? It's that now there's 200 million people interacting with it, and you have no idea what they're asking of it, nor do you know if they know if the response is correct or not. And, and that makes the feedback training a real challenge.
Exactly, right. And then when you bring that sort of into the realm of customer service, no brand can actually take that chance, right? One event like that can damage your brand, and no brand can take that chance. And paradoxically, one of the things that I found when running my company was, the CIO would have these, dreams of 5 years from now, contact center being reduced by 90%. Whereas, in the 5 years that we were in business, when what we saw, contact centers actually adding more and more humans, right? Because at the end of the day, you need more capacity to recover from damage being done by bad automation, right?
The 90% reduction was in their market cap, not their headcount in customer service. Whoops.
Yeah. So, and I think also there is this issue of the, kind of like the human experience itself. I think it's, there may be something as too much automation, not because, we don't like efficiency, but we're not slaves to efficiency all the time, right? I mean, there are aspects to experience that are not rooted in efficiency. They're rooted in sort of pleasure or, or happiness or whatever, and those measures, I think, will become more and more important as people get saturated with automation all around them. So that's where we push back.
If I may, Venky, so I kind of refer to that as context polarization or polarity, where for 99% of the transactions, just let it happen automatic. I don't want to know about it. Don't bother me. Just give me the lowest possible price, automated, don't even care. But for some ever shrinking proportion of the transactions, that human factor, that little tiny bit of human interaction becomes the most critical part for customer satisfaction. And it's going to be harder and harder to tell the difference necessarily. So it's among the challenges that we have in operationalizing this stuff. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I also see a future where, investment actually starts flowing backwards in some ways, right? So, for example, in the restaurant industry, I'm seeing businesses crop up, restaurants crop up that are the opposite of chains. So, they are kind of bespoke meals cooked to your specifications. You tell us what you want, and we'll cook it for you, right? I mean, that is, there's a lot of automation in the logistics of that, but the experience of that is custom, human delivered, and human to human. So I think we'll see technology evolve to deliver better human experiences as well.
And the customers, when they get that custom experience, they're going to pay a premium for it. They're going to post about it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and so forth. They're going to be bragging about it. It's going to be a much more enriched experience on their end, and they'll pay almost anything for that.
Exactly right.
So I took us down this rabbit hole, Venky, of chatbots, because I know you've spent a good chunk of your career in that space. But what are some of the other kind of conversational AI applications that you're excited about?
So one of the nice one of the things about conversational AI, back to my statement, it makes practical things that we've always wanted to do but couldn't before, right? And these things are sort of not just useful, in some ways they're game changing, right? So for example, and I kind of broadly put in the customer service contact center industry, broadly put the applications in these three buckets. Eliminate, assist, and automate. Automate is what we were talking about chatbots and sort of eliminating or reducing the human footprint. But everything else is about making humans do their jobs better, right? So, for example, in the illuminate category, so one of the long-standing problems in the contact center industry. So the contact center industry, just to take you through that a little bit, is relatively low skill, low paid people answering phones, on behalf of a company, right? I mean, and the nature of that industry is nobody thinks of an entire career. So it's an entry level person who's there for 3-4 years until they can get a better job, right? And now a brand is putting armies of people like this in front of their customers, and the customer who's calling in thinks that they're talking to an expert, right? So there's this kind of this fundamental disconnect between, the economics of service and the expectations of service. And one of the beautiful things that conversational AI has done is to be able to upskill these people to do a better job than they could otherwise, right? An example is something called a field called quality monitoring, right? So you'll hear when you call, most call centers, this call may be recorded for quality purposes, right? What they really mean is that they're going to record every call, and in the past, at the end of the month, they'll take, say, 1 in every 100 calls. The supervisor will sit with the agent and kind of spend a couple of hours reviewing the calls to understand what went well, what didn't go well, and to kind of coach them, right? So, but now you're doing, you used to do this with 1 in 100 calls, over a period of 2 hours between supervisor and employee, and kind of a laborious, kind of error-prone process and not very exact. Whereas with conversational AI, now you can kind of plug in that engine on every call. You can apply machine learning to extract these metrics out of every call that you're trying to extract in that 2-hour call, right? And try to code. And furthermore, you can kind of categorize those metrics that you got, as things that are really bad, needs intervention, things that are kind of mildly harmful and can be improved with coaching and so on. So now you have this, this kind of a really intelligent dashboard. And if you now share that between supervisor and employee, you have an opportunity for continuous improvement on every call. And then you throw in some collaboration behind it. You now have, these employees that can learn from others, learn from their supervisors on every call, and get massively better than using the old process. So that's an example of like a game-changing innovation that's enabled by conversational AI. There's plenty like this that are showing up. Another one, just to give you an example, is customer satisfaction, right? So again, many businesses will say, for example, if I book a flight, if I call United Airlines, I have to go through the announcement that says, at the end of this call, we'd like your feedback. Would you mind if we called you to give you a feedback, right? And I can't wait to press the get me past this BS fast enough button. But and typically what happens is that you get 1 in 100 people providing feedback on calls, and they're greatly biased towards the people who are annoyed at the calls. They're the ones who want to provide feedback. They're so angry that they want to, yell at somebody, right? So you're getting feedback that is sparse and at one extreme end of the scale.
Venky, it's like to give us the most biased, low quality, unuseful data that's possible, please hit star at the end of the call.
Exactly.
let's poison the entire well of data with you saying that you want to call and complain.
Exactly. So, but with conversational AI, now again, if you're transcribing and analyzing every call, and if you have the right machine learning algorithm that can more or less accurately extract, at the very least, you can summarize every call. So there are things like you can do a call summary, you can do a call disposition, you can kind of extract sentiment, You can do a satisfaction score for the call. All of these you can do automated, and then you can throw that up on a dashboard. So you now have a much wider coverage plus much more actionable, accurate intelligence. So those are some of the things that are amazing new capabilities that you get from this technology.
So Raphael watching is talking about people within contact centers being focused on talking to customers, right? So what should people be doing, Venky, right? If they're not just taking phone calls, to your point about augmenting, I guess, some of the things that happen now. What other things should human beings be doing in contact centers, as an example?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. There's so many things that you can do to make a contact center work better. But I do generally agree that if you're throwing together a contact center because you want to assign 100 people to talk to your customers all day, that's kind of, you're probably not thinking about it in the most optimal sense, right? So one of the areas that I've personally been interested in is kind of how do you even characterize the best treatment for a particular request? Not every person who's calling, I mean, they're calling because in many cases they don't have an alternative, but if they had, they would use that alternative, right? So in some cases, they're calling about a problem that's not going to be fixed now. They know it, but they just want to log the problem and they want to know that somebody's working on it, right? They don't need to wait on a queue for 10 minutes to talk to an agent for another 5 minutes to log their name an issue only for the agent to say, hey, yeah, we have to work on this, we'll let you know, right? So if you can kind of triage that accurately. So accurate triaging is something that contact centers should be doing much better, right? Who's the customer? Why are they coming in? And what's the best way to tee them up for service, right? Is it to put them into a queue to talk? Or is it to text them to say, hey, we've taken care of this? Is it to tell them, thanks for calling, we'll text you a form, can you send in your information? We know we have to work on it, and we'll keep texting you when there's an update, right? So there are different ways of treating these things, and putting the customer in the right bucket is a question of intent analysis, which is why they're calling, and triaging, which is what is the best way to treat them. So these are, I think, some of the ways call centers can get better. And there's a role for conversational AI in many of these kind of transformations that you can use to extract better efficiency out of the contact center.
Venky, along those lines, I think we've all probably had the experience of you're talking to the call center person and they're reading from a script, or you can tell, right? And it's not only disingenuous, it can be offensive. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I think when we call in, we're looking for empathy. I don't necessarily expect you to solve my problem right now, but just, show me some empathy and make me feel better about it. And I know that back when Uber started, they did some psychological studies and why was Uber so compelling to people, such an amazing experience. And the key piece was the real-time map that showed the car was on the way. Mm-hmm. And it was more important to people let them know that they were starting their journey than necessarily when they were going to get to their endpoint. Mm-hmm. Right. So just knowing that there's a car coming to solve my problem, getting me to the airport or whatever, and that the process was kicked off and that there would be an endpoint to that was the most valuable part of that information transaction. Does that kind of resonate with some of what you're looking at?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. So when we talk about the human experience, a lot of that comes down to empathy, and you're absolutely right. Empathy is less about solving the problem right now. It's more about sort of creating a journey that is kind of informative and pleasurable for the party looking for service, right? So just letting them know, businesses are getting better, right? So now, I bought something, I didn't like it, I shipped it back. The moment I dropped it off, I get a text message saying, we've got your package, and here's a link you can track your return. And that is beautiful, right? I mean, it kind of heads off. If that doesn't happen, 7 days later, I don't see my refund. I'm going to call and I'm going to talk to somebody about a refund for 20 minutes, right? And it's an annoying call. I'm going to be annoyed. There's no amount of empathy that's going to solve that particular annoyance for me. And there's no need to even do that if you can demonstrate empathy by anticipating, informing. It's not necessarily about great language and a soothing voice. It's really about understanding the need of the customer and proactively addressing it.
I've heard that called creepy comfort. It's creepy that you know that I want to know what's going on every 30 seconds, but I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and regardless of channel, right, Venky? I mean, you actually introduced me to a term years ago that I'd never heard prior to that. This idea of kind of persistent chat, right, where you can go back to a bot or a person, or I even have some that my personal favorite is some of these companies now have WhatsApp. And you can see the whole history of the conversation. They can see the whole history of the conversation. We're all kind of frustrated by whether it's a chat bot or an actual person on the other end of a chat. You spend 20 minutes, doing something, and then they tell you to call in, and you're like, not only did I not want to call because that wasn't my preferred engagement model to begin with, but now I got to start over, with somebody in a different silo who doesn't know what's going on when I start over with them. So. Everybody talks about omni-channel, but in reality, my feeling is it hasn't really been, omni-channel. It's been maybe multi-channel, if that makes any sense, but not omni-channel. What's your sense? I mean, you were at Avaya, then you were in the startup world where you were doing this. What's your sense as to, like, are we close to this true omni-channel nirvana?
Yeah, no, this is something, as you point out, I was very passionate about, and one of the key driving factors behind my own company, which is the notion of persistent interactions, and it's really the idea. So most contact centers treat the interaction as a transactional interaction, right? I mean, it's this customer coming in at this point in time, and how can I best kind of get the customer off the phone. And they're kind of assigning these low cost resources in the most efficient way possible, right? Whereas the expectation of the consumer coming in, and I find this. I mean, I'm an expert here, but I find this happens all the time. When I get on the phone with somebody, I launch into a story rather than what they want, which is a very crisp description of the specific problem I'm trying to solve, and I can't help that. I mean, that's the way most humans are. I've listened to phone calls at call centers, right? I mean, I listened to a phone call just to to understand what was going on. There's this guy who bought a vacuum cleaner. It wasn't working, right? And that's not what he said. When he picked up the phone, he said he was in Manchester. His son was in Liverpool. It was Christmas. And they just got the package, and it was very kind of him his son to do that. That's 5 minutes of a story leading up to the problem of, I opened the package that my son sent me from Liverpool to Manchester, but I don't know how to turn it on. So and that's that's how that's kind of natural for human beings. So so I think the notion of a persistent chat that is very contextful and builds a relationship over time between the business and the user is kind of more natural to the user. And if businesses can solve that problem, I think they'll hold on to the user a lot better than treating everything as a one-off transaction, which is kind of very disembodied and impersonal. So that was kind of the thought behind that. And of course, it's also more efficient in the long run because there's more context that allows you to deliver faster, right? I mean, if you know what this customer has done already before they come in and the specific problem they encountered the last time, you can queue up the solution to the problem in addition to providing this continuity of experience to the user.
Venky, if I may, I love everything you just said because it's so critically important as we embrace AI even more and we try to use the technology to be even more human than we already are. I've made the comment before that one of the things that makes humans a unique species is two key things: tool use, although that's not unique in us, but combining tool use with some symbolic communication to tell stories. And I think you're absolutely right. It's the combination of those two things either makes us effective or ineffective. It's that storytelling thing that's going to make this generative AI stuff work effectively or not. I'm totally going to humble brag here. As I'm trying to work on my own expertise, and I'm a technical guy for 30 plus years, if I look at the 4 books I'm reading right now, it's Evolutionary Psychology, David Buss, I highly recommend it. The Matter with Things, Ian McGilchrist, phenomenal on how you achieve whole brain thinking, and in particular, right brain thinking integrated with left brain thinking, and then one book on systems engineering. If you want to be anywhere with the cool people in this AI world right now, you got to get this psychology stuff in your repertoire, I think.
Absolutely.
And storytelling and tool use is a key piece of that.
Absolutely.
Great conversation. Well, Venky, thank you so much for being here. And I want to have you back because we got to talk about what's next, the future, and all the you've predicted a couple futures. So maybe next time we can do the crystal ball thing with you.
Absolutely, love to. It's been have loved being in this conversation.
Thanks, Venky.
Cheers.
Chris, good conversation. And, you brought up this idea of storytelling. We did a show with your predecessor, Carlos. I gotta pull it back up, but it was a great guest we had who's an expert in storytelling. And we talked about misinformation and bias and all that stuff. That was a really good show, maybe, 6-7 months ago. But I'll get that link and post it here. We're also doing a webinar with Carlos tomorrow, which is really a master class on persuasion. And it's all about, the importance of persuasion, not just from a sales and marketing standpoint, but from a corporate communication standpoint and just human standpoint. Right. So, interesting idea.
Well, and persuasion, some people might take that word and say, it's got a negative connotation. Like, no, I mean, if I'm persuading you to a positive outcome that you're looking for, it's a very positive thing. So in all of these things, we need to achieve balance. We have to do the yin yang thing and recognize that, any technology or any storytelling can be used for good, used for bad. And that's where this whole question of governance and ethics comes into the whole discussion.
Yep. Really interesting. Well, good show. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And thanks to our guest, Venky, again. We're offering free coaching sessions and state-of-the-industry briefings on a variety of topics of digital transformation, automation, and AI. So if you're interested, go to network.irpaai.com, schedule that. Chris is also, as I alluded to before, leading our training program. So if you would benefit from in-person or virtual training around intelligent automation, data analytics, digital transformation, or I don't know, Chris, you've got like 11 things on your expertise list that
pottery,
pondering. I don't know, but anyway, just let us know. Happy to help wherever we can. If we don't know the answer, we usually know somebody who does. It's the benefit of a large network. Otherwise, we'll be back 2 weeks from now, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Have a great week, everybody.
Cheers.